some of the Wall Street banks really encouraging their employees to come back to work. You, of course, were at Goldman Sachs for over 30 years. What do you think is the right approach here, and what does it really mean?
I think the right approach, first of all, is to go slowly and carefully. I mean, I think there are some really good reasons to bring employees back to the office, aside from the fact that it builds camaraderie and esprit de corps in a way that Zoom or other technologies don't do. But I ran global recruiting for the investment management division, and we had lots of interns and apprenticeships and young people coming in. And I think to bring them within the culture, I think that is really hard to do over this technological way of doing business today. That's not to say you can't do trading and sales and so forth on this platform. It's just harder to grow your business and to build out new teams and new hires and do the training that's necessary. I think it's much harder to do over technology. Not impossible, but you have to go slow because the reality is some number of your employees may be vulnerable or have comorbidities where they didn't ever have to disclose those working in an office environment before. And now you have to maybe put yourself in a position where people have situations that they may have to unveil and discuss that may be uncomfortable for them to discuss with others. And so, we're learning a lot. And this pandemic is teaching us more every day. And I think that, to think it's behind us and all over with and we can just jump in, I think is quite naive.
What are your expectations then for a COVID-19 vaccine? Of course, we heard from Pfizer CEO who expects that we will see a rollout of it by the end of 2020. And of course, we can think about that. And I'd love to get your perspective on how that impacts the markets and your market outlook.
So two things. There's a great story that was written by Admiral Stockdale. Admiral Stockdale was the most senior officer held prisoner of war in Vietnam. He was shot down. He was held for 7 years. And upon his release, they asked him about how he got through it all. And he said he never failed to be optimistic at the end that there would be an end. But they asked him who failed the most during the process. And he says those were the optimists. And they said, what do you mean? They said, well, it were the people who thought they would be out by Christmas and Christmas would come and they weren't out. And then they thought they'd be out by Easter, and it didn't happen. And then Thanksgiving, and they became further depressed and mired in it. Look, we're going to get through this. But to set false expectations of when a vaccine is coming, or when we're going to all be able to all go back to work, or all go back to school, or how we're going to behave, I think it's a premature optimism that is subject to, we can get depressed here. And we can get bummed out, especially if vaccines don't get delivered on time. If we don't have treatments that extend life beyond where we are right this minute. We're doing a lot of learning, but this, we have no idea whether we're in baseball terms, the second inning of this game or the 8th inning of this game. And we won't know till it's over. And with that, we have thousands of people who are dead, 200,000 in the U.S., and still losing quite a bit on a daily basis. So, look, we still have a very significant problem on our hand, and politics is playing such a significant role in this, where people are getting together and not wearing masks and think, hey, I'm really showing my stuff, which is sheer idiocy as far as I'm concerned. But they're not only putting themselves at risk, but the community at risk and our border at risk. Why would you open your border given what you see happening on the U.S. side of the border, just even recently with the president's rallies and so forth?
I mean, there's so much there that you're discussing as it relates to the uncertainty. And I love that interesting aspect as it relates to being optimistic, because I'm definitely an optimist, but I think that that's an important perspective and context to have. It's managing your expectations, which we learned at Goldman Sachs, that's for sure. But where does that leave you then? There's the uncertainty surrounding a vaccine and also the uncertainty surrounding the presidential election. How does that play into your thinking?
Well, I'm anxious. I think the future of American democracy is at stake. And I don't mean to be, hyperbolic about this. I mean, I'm very serious. We operate in our country under a set of rules and of laws. And if the rules and laws aren't abided by and upheld, then that breaks down the whole confidence of the system. Can you imagine just being in a city where you had all sets of rules and laws and nobody abided by them? And, you know, we would have sheer chaos. Well, at the federal level, that's what's happening. And so, you know, I'm looking for, regardless of party, Republican and Democrat, I think President Trump represents something so totally different than what we have ever experienced in our country. Other countries have, and those outcomes weren't good at the end. And so I'm working hard to try to get Americans in Canada to vote, as I think you know. But look, I think we're at a very high-risk moment for the United States. The combination of this pandemic, the racial problems that we're having, the what I call, and I think the vice president used this term recently, was the K economy. Yep, the very wealthy are doing really super well, and the people who don't have very much are having a really challenging time, and we don't have the supplemental payments going now. The Senate has withheld those. And so we're at an inflection point, and I think the next 50 days is going to be an important 50 days for the history of our country.
Bruce, I want to tap your expertise in your former role as ambassador. Our partners at CTV News have learned that our finance minister is finally going to come out tomorrow with retaliatory measures against, again, tariffs from the American side of the border. I mean, how carefully does Canada have to tread here in terms of diplomacy and tit-for-tat diplomacy?
Look, it's a fine line that Canada has to walk. And it's an unfortunate set of circumstances. I will tell you, hard for me to believe as the former ambassador, we'd find ourselves in a position that a president who would agree to a new deal under the new NAFTA, and it goes into effect in July, and just weeks later slaps Canada with aluminum tariffs. But let's be realistic about what this is. This is largely political, and it feeds into the Donald Trump narrative of, I'm the right guy. And remember, he used the language just recently about Canada in a speech where he said, sometimes your friends are, you know, worse than your foes. And he was referring to Canada, which is ridiculous. But Canada can't not do anything. And so you have to find this balance as to, you know, don't exacerbate this situation to the point where, you know, the Trump administration starts retaliating and you retaliate and it goes back and forth and gets escalated. On the other hand, you can't just sit on the sidelines and let these kinds of things happen. It's unfortunate. I don't want you to do anything to the United States of America and to, you know, our businesses and enterprises, but I totally understand the reaction.